Today we're going to be talking about how the use of theme can make for a meatier movie meal. Specifically, the use of theme in 1986's Aliens. Aliens' writing credits are a story by James Cameron, David Giler, and Walter Hill, with the screenplay by credit going to James Cameron. And of course, the whole shebang is based on characters created by Dan O'Bannon and Ronald Shusett, found in 1979's Alien. So, what is the theme? It can actually be expressed in two ways. The first is death, existing, living. The second is dead, sleeping, awake. Both are the same thing. In Aliens, sleeping and merely existing, as opposed to living, are a gray area between true life and death. The traps that our hero Ripley will struggle to escape. Of course, pretty well all action or horror movies have life and death situations in them. But in Aliens, life and death aren't just part of the plot, they're the point of the story. Before we dive into this, let's just do a wee little recap for those that might not have seen the first movie. Our hero, Ripley, is part of a mining crew on the way back to Earth. They get a strange call that seems like an SOS, they touch down, obligated to help another ship in need. Except, whoops, it wasn't an SOS, it was a warning to stay away. Pop goes an egg, everybody ignores Ripley's warning to keep the infected Kane off the ship, then pop goes Kane. Munch, 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 Ripley saves the cat and zips away in an escape pod in a hypersleep chamber. That's where Aliens picks up. A salvage crew comes across the escape ship and finds Ripley in her pod that looks remarkably like a coffin. But, a space coffin. And what is she doing? Sleeping. But, hypersleeping, which is where your vitals are slowed down to next to nothing. She's hanging in a limbo between life and death, existing but not fully living, which she might have done forever, if the salvage ship hadn't run across her purely by chance. So right off the bat, we're up and running with our theme. We have this reinforced when Ripley wakes up from a nightmare and is asked if she wants a sedative to help her rest. She replies,
"No. I've slept enough."
And that is the central issue of our entire story. All of the cool guns, the badass alien queen, the marines, the dropships, it's all in service of Ripley saying,
"I've slept enough."
This is Ripley flat out stating the theme for us, that she has to escape the gray space and start fully living again. She is trapped in the nightmare created by the first movie, Alien, one that still has her in its grips. There's an interview somewhere that I couldn't find again, so maybe I'm totally making it up, where James Cameron talks about how he wrote this story about vets returning from war to find that they can't exist in the peacetime world. It fits exactly with what Ripley is going through. Unfortunately, the grayness of mere existence grows denser as she learns that she was in her hypersleep long enough for her daughter to die of old age. Motherhood, by the way, is another big theme in this story. Additionally, Ripley is stripped of her flight status and ends up working in a loader, a job far below her skill levels and training. Everything that made her life worth living is gone. She is existing, not living. She passes her days in her small apartment, which I believe doesn't even have windows. She's living in a virtual coffin. Another hypersleep chamber, even though she's not in hypersleep. She just as well might as be, though. Along comes business guy Burke with an offer. We've lost contact with the colonists on the planet where your whole thing went down. Feel like coming along as an advisor? Ripley's initial response is a great big hell no. She's being asked to dive back face first into her worst nightmare. The problem is that the nightmare isn't just out there. It's back here on Earth with her, and it won't let her live. What makes her change her mind? Sleeping. More specifically, a nightmare. But it's here that Ripley makes a wrong choice, which sounds right in terms of the plot. Her condition for going along on the mission is,
"You're going out there to destroy them, right? Not to study, not to bring back, but to wipe them out."
She's choosing death as her objective. It makes sense, right? She wants to destroy her nightmares so she can live. However, every time someone chooses death in Aliens, it results in a negative consequence. This happens over and over again. Plus, we want Ripley to begin living fully. We want her to choose a full living experience as her objective, her raison d'etre. Luckily, Ripley is going to have an encounter that will move her from having death as her objective to wanting to live fully again. Off she goes. Ripley's in a hypersleep coffin again, but this time she's not alone. She wakes up next to space marines who bounce up out of their beds slapping each other around with their macho marine stuff. There's just one great big problem. The marines are still sleeping. Not literally, of course, but they too have entered this grey nether space. In their case, it's where they believe they can wipe up any problem easy peasy because they're all macho and stuff. Space macho. Ripley isn't the only one looking for a wake-up call. Ripley even recognizes that the Marines are sleeping in a later scene. She tries to explain what happened in the first movie, but the Marines don't listen.
Look, man, I only need to know one thing. Where they are.
Ripley snaps at them, trying to wake them up. But then the inexperienced lieutenant puts them right back to sleep by insisting that they're going to do this by the book. But there is no book for what's going to occur. It gets worse when Ripley discovers that Bishop is an android. The problem with Bishop is twofold. On the surface, the problem is that one of the crew members in Alien was an android, and that didn't turn out so well. The second problem brings us back to our theme. What is an android if not a being that exists, but isn't truly alive? When Ripley snaps at him, she's not just freaking out that there's an android on board. She's also freaking out because Bishop is Ripley. They're the same. She's unconsciously recognized that she too is basically an android, and it's horrifying. So they land. The colony town, you guessed it, exists, but is not alive because all of the colonists are gone. They get their first hints that Ripley isn't completely nuts or a liar.
Acid for blood.
And then they find two facehuggers suspended in sample tubes. In other words, the facehuggers are also existing but not living, and won't come alive until someone frees them, aka wakes them up. They get the first sign of life on their motion detectors. They also almost kill that life except for Hicks' quick action to save Newt. They chase her through the grated floor, much like the Queen will do later. Newt is hiding out, terrified, only leaving her little hidey hole to get supplies. She has no hope in her of survival after seeing her family and all the colonists picked off. That's Newt's version of sleeping or merely existing. She doesn't believe there's any sort of future for them. She's certain that they're all going to die. Ripley is in that existing gray state. So are the Marines. So is Bishop the android. And so is Newt. This is where Ripley finally starts to wake up and come alive. This is the encounter we mentioned earlier that will shift Ripley's goal from death.
You're going out there to destroy them, right?
To being fully alive. Her mission is to give Newt hope, to give her the idea that they have a chance. By giving Ripley the mission that forces her awake, this story becomes not just about Ripley saving Newt, it's also about Newt saving Ripley. The Marines find little blinky lights,
Personal data transmitters.
where the colonists are, but not if they are alive or dead. Touché, little blinky lights.
Personal data transmitters.
And move it out, move it out, move it out, to go find the colonists, and find a horrifying hellscape where the colonists are glued to the walls. Are they alive? Are they dead? I bet you know the answer to that one. Existing. They're merely existing. That's the answer. Because of their location, they can't use their usual type of ammo. However, Vasquez and Drake live for the big guns, which is not true living, and they sneak ammo back into their guns. On our good old thermometer, they're choosing death both literally and figuratively, and it's going to have consequences. One of the colonists pops awake and begs the Marines to kill her. She's making a definitive choice. The Marines are horrified, but still existing in that dream space where they think they can save the day. And then all hell breaks loose. The aliens choose death in order to live. It's what makes them so monstrous in our eyes. The walls, which one naturally would consider dead, come alive. Ripley has been mostly passive. She's the one that grabbed Newt and tried to get the Marines to wake up to the situation, but by and large she's mostly been reacting. The Inquiry Board told her she's unfit to be on important spacecraft. Burke told her to come along for the ride. And then once she was there, she merely watched the action through monitors. But now, Ripley, faced with protecting Newt, not to mention the surviving Marines, finally snaps awake. Lieutenant Gorman, by contrast, has just had his dreams of a by-the-books mission destroyed, and he becomes completely useless. In fact, he becomes worse than useless. He desperately wants to get back to his dream, but Ripley's actions make that impossible, and then he's off to the gray state in a more literal fashion. Now alive, Ripley takes control of the situation. She doesn't exactly save the day, but she makes it so a bad outcome doesn't become a worse outcome. The vital sign monitors show some of the Marines are still alive, but Ripley warns them that the Marines are beyond help. They're already being cocooned. In other words, those Marines may still exist, but they're practically dead. So our heroes choose death again.
We take off and nuke the entire site from orbit.
Again, it makes sense plot-wise. Thematically, it earns them
I guess we're not going to be leaving now, right?
They're trapped in this nightmare, just like Ripley. We generally associate nightmares that we're trapped in with nighttime, right? Hey, Newt, when do the aliens come out, mostly?
Mostly come at night. Mostly.
Thanks, Newt. Ripley puts Newt down for a nap. Newt is worried about bad dreams. Ripley looks in Newt's doll's head and says there's no bad dreams in there, but Newt corrects her saying the doll isn't real. Newt knows dreams from reality, something all the Marines had to learn the hard way. Ripley confronts Carter about what she learned, that he chose to send colonists out to the alien ship without a proper warning. He chose death to make a buck. Carter Burke has a dream of wealth that will give him a better life. They get more bad news. The atmospheric processing plant is going to blow them up real good. The only one qualified to remote pilot the other dropship from orbit is Bishop. Another nightmare has come true. Ripley is going to have to trust their lives to the non-live man. The lieutenant wakes up, repentant. He hasn't just woken from his being unconscious. He's woken from his dream of life being orderly and by the books. It's then that Ripley makes a big mistake, thematically speaking. She hasn't transformed sleep into a safe healing space yet. She's still trapped in her nightmare, one that she shares with Newt. So sleeping is still a no-no. Ripley does it anyway, and what happens?
Wake up. Be quiet. We're in trouble.
Carter Burke turns off the cameras to the medbay, rendering the Marines asleep to the threat to Ripley and Newt. Ripley needs to wake up the Marines to the situation. What do we set when we want to wake up? An alarm. Ripley explains how Burke would have gotten away with it. The Marines wouldn't have been able to alert authorities about Ripley and Newt being impregnated because Carter would have arranged accidents for them where? In their hypersleep chambers, aka space coffins. They choose death for Burke, but choosing death always has negative consequence. Aliens attack. Hudson finally wakes up that this is really happening, man, and goes out fighting like a beast. Burke, in his panic, he does just about the worst thing possibly could. He chooses death for the Marines, Ripley, and Newt. And he gets his final wake-up call. Our survivors run for the second dropship brought down by Bishop. They're running towards life. But, Vasquez and Gorman choose death. Not that you can blame them, and Gorman even earns a bro handshake from Vasquez, with the consequence being... Ripley's now left with only the non-alive Bishop as her ally, the only one she'll have to count on. Ripley's alone now in her quest to fight for life. Newt's life, and through Newt, her own. Ripley gears up, heads down into Alea-Palooza. Newt's about to get introduced to the working end of a face-hugger. Another life-death thing here. Eggs are life, except in this case, eggs are death for humans. But Ripley saves the day, hooray! Until she runs them right into a room full of leathery death-life eggs. And, oh yeah, Mom. The Alien Queen is our whole thematic death, existing, life theme wrapped up in one sexy bundle. She's merely existing, because the only thing she can do, strung out the way she is with her egg sac, is give birth. She isn't physically free to do anything else. The life part of our theme is of course the eggs that she is laying. But those eggs are also death for any other species that encounter them. The Alien Queen tries a little sneakiness, and that gets all of her eggs blown up. But that's also Ripley choosing death. And in so doing, she knocks the Queen free from our egg-layer tail thing, freeing the Queen up to chase them. Another consequence of choosing death that they might not have had to face if Ripley had chosen life and just run like hell. Run, 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 chase, 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 Bishop saves them, zoom, 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 up and away, safe, alive. And Newt says,
I knew you'd come.
Newt is now able to have hope. Up there in the Sulaco, they're a right old nuclear family. Hicks the dad, Ripley the mom, Newt the child, and Bishop the dog. Who's the first that the Queen attacks? Bishop. She rips the existing but not living android literally in two. His dead legs go one way, his alive top the other. And Bishop is our walking talking representation of the gray space between death and being fully alive. When the Queen rips Bishop in half, that's her telling Ripley, no more in-betweenness for you. It's either life or death from here on out. At this point, the Queen is pure death. Her ability to give life is gone. The thing that held her in mere existence, the egg-laying tail sac, was destroyed. She's there to kill, and she goes after Ripley's source of life, Newt. Ripley was actually safe in that base she locked herself into. She could have stayed in there, but that would mean losing Newt. And losing Newt, but being physically alive, would have put her right back where she started, existing but not living. So, fight, 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 and the place where Ripley and the Queen will make their ultimate decisions about death, full life, and the gray in-between occurs in the airlock, that twilight zone that exists between the life inside the ship and the death in outer space. The Queen, being pure death, she doesn't try to grab the ladder to save her own life. Her only goal is to haul Ripley out into space, to bring Ripley to death with her. But Ripley clings, literally, to life, in this case a ladder rung. And at the end, Ripley is able to finally go to sleep in the hypersleep chamber, because this time she knows she's going to wake up to live again. She's earned sleep that is now restful and regenerating, instead of filled with nightmares.
Can I dream?
Yes, honey. I think we both can.
She has a surrogate daughter to fill the void left by the one she lost. She has a reason to live instead of merely exist. Beautiful. A perfect ending. Until, of course, a sequel. It's all over it.